It is fairly certain Benedict left Rome at age 20, as he was mature enough to discern the decadence and immorality of his friends and classmates. Benedict and his nurse made their way to Affile, a small town deep in the mountains, about 30 miles from Rome. The anonymity he so desperately sought was not to be his in this small village, especially once he miraculously mended an earthenware vessel which his nurse had borrowed and broken. He pleaded with her not to share the miraculous happenings. Did she comply? No. She went around the village broadcasting the miracle that had come about. The locals even put up a sign in the church detailing the miracle and the young man who had brought it about. That was to be the end of any possible inner peace and quiet meditative reflection he could hope for. He had to leave Affile and any friends he had made there, as well as his pious nurse. He made the decision to make it alone, with only God as his comfort and shield.
Now completely alone, Benedict scaled hills upon hills until he arrived in the shaggy, rocky, rough-hewn mountains of Subiaco. Till today, the mountains are steep and more than a little challenging to ascend. At last, a hermitage where he could find some peace and solitude. But how? As God would have it, Benedict came upon a monk called Romanus. He poured his heart out to the monk, sharing his deep desire to live a hermit's life. Although the monk lived in a monastery quite a distance away, he, without hesitating, dressed Benedict in sheepskins and escorted the youth to a cave in the mountains. Benedict desired to be alone. Well, and here in this cave, removed from all civilization, he would know the quiet and solitary life for which he so hungered. His cave, with its flat, sharp, jagged rock as a roof, made access to him from the top of the cave impossible. And should one attempt to approach the cave from below, the sharp climb to the cave was made hazardous by unscalable cliffs, thick brush, and a forest dense with trees, obscuring it further.
Alone and solitary, prayer his loving companion, living this very austere life, his only human contact with anyone was the monk Romanus, who brought him a little sustenance each day. His desert life went on for 3 years.
Evidently, it was not the will of God that Benedict keep the light that he had found hidden under a bushel basket, but was to now use this light to bring light into a very dark world. One day his solitude was interrupted when a group of shepherds appeared. At first, because Benedict was living in a cave uninhabitable for a human being, and because he was dressed in the skins of animals, the shepherds took him for an animal. When he opened his mouth and began to speak of God and heavenly things, they not only became aware he was human, but a very holy human. Never had they heard anyone speak as he did, and they were enthralled. Because you cannot keep a light hidden, soon the light reached others, who then came seeking spiritual food from Benedict.
As he chose to live as the desert fathers lived before him, and as they had not been exempt from the attacks of the flesh and the devil, neither would he be. One such temptation is described by St. Gregory, his biographer, was, on a certain day when he was alone, the tempter presented himself. The evil spirit brought before his imagination a certain woman he had formerly seen, and inflamed his heart with such vehement desire at the memory of her that he had great difficulty in repressing it. And being almost overcome, he thought of leaving his solitude. Suddenly, by divine grace, he found the strength he needed, and seeing close by a thick growth of briars and nettles, he stripped off his garment and cast himself into the midst of them. There he rolled until his whole body was lacerated. Thus, through these bodily wounds, he cured the wounds of his soul and was never again troubled in the same way.
We'd like to ask our abbot to tell us the meaning of this statue of Saint Benedict.
Well, the statue behind us here, Saint Benedict is shown with he's holding a book in his hand, and then there's a cup or a chalice which has a snake coming out of it. And the book is the book of the office, the book of the divine office, the liturgy of the hours, which is such an important part of our life. And the cup comes from a story, a time when St. Benedict was asked by a group of monks to come and be their abbot. But when he got there, they found out that he really meant business, and he was too strict for them. And one of the monks tried to poison him. And when St. Benedict blessed his cup, it broke, and the poisoned wine fell out. And so he knew what had happened, and he left. But that's the symbol there of the snake in the cup. There's another symbol here on the base of the statue is the raven at his feet, because when he was a hermit at Subiaco in Italy, he was brought bread by the raven.
Benedict left to return to Subiaco, only not to the solitary life he had been living, but to begin the walk God had been preparing him for these 3 years alone on the mountain.